All right, good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and we're going to do a quick video on putting together some piping. Okay, we're right in the middle of our Classic Duffel Bag video, but I'm going to do piping on that bag. It's extremely optional. You don't have to by any means. But I wanted to add it onto the particular bag I'm making because it's 2 days before Christmas, and guess what this is? Christmas present. So, I am going to add piping. So I figured I might as well just stop that video, make piping its own video so that folks could, just learn that part if they wanted. And if, and if they're just wanting to do that bag without the piping, then they can watch it all the way through. Because once I've got the piping on the end pieces here, the rest of the build is going to be the exact same, no matter if there were piping on it or not. So, without further ado, we're going to make some piping. Okay, now this stuff right here, this is actual piping cord that I got from like an upholstery supply shop. Okay, and it's kind of a fibrous, it's not necessarily plastic, it's not necessarily rope, it's kind of different. But not everybody has this stuff available to them, and that's okay. Because what works really, really well is cheap weed eater string. Okay, not the good stuff, not the expensive stuff, not the stuff that says it'll cut into a chain link fence. The cheap stuff, okay? Little small diameter, like the free stuff that they give you with a cheap weed eater. So anyway, we've got that, and then I've got some strips of leather that I cut. They are 1 1/4 inches wide and about 1.5 to 2 ounces thick. Okay, now I cut this myself out of the same leather that I'm making the bag out of, and then I used my bell skiver to make it this thin. I realize not everyone has that capability. I get it. But a nice thin, like a garment weight leather or something like that, will make just fine piping, okay? And usually my piping would be like an accent color. It would be a different color than what the rest of the project is. But I'm making it out of the same on this bag because this bag already has 3 different colors of leather in it, and I don't want to introduce a 4th color, okay? So I will show you how I make my piping. So, first thing I need to know, these are the 2 pieces that will be piped are the end caps of the bag. All right. So, the first thing I need to know is just the distance around that. All right. And it's about 42 inches. So, I made sure and cut these longer than that. All right. And then I know that these are way longer than that. So, that's good. I'm going to take this. Currently has just its natural edge on it, but I want to make it a nice squared off pretty edge like so. And I'm going to take some double-sided tape that is 1 inch wide. Remember, I said that thing is 1 1/4 inches wide. So 1 inch wide will make sure that it goes down the center of it and it doesn't overhang either edge. Okay? And the first thing I'm going to do is start this double-sided tape, and I want to start it about an inch or so from the very end of my leather. I don't want it to go all the way to the end of my leather, an inch or so back, because that will help with the transition. Once it goes all the way around the piece I need it to go around, that will help it to splice back into itself here in a little bit. Okay, and all I'm going to do, let me put this cord up to it because it's wasteful to use any more than I have to, which it's pretty much the same length, so that's okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just line this whole piece with my double-sided tape. And this is the one thing about this particular leather, it's got a lot of pull-up to it. So as I wrap it around this piping and build my piping, it's actually going to take on almost a whole nother color as it is, just because it will express all the pull-up characteristics of the leather. Okay, now, I did that. Now, I don't like to take the backing off of the whole piece of tape at once, because if something happens and I accidentally knock it off the table or something, then I've got a big old jumbled mess, and I don't want to deal with that. So I just do a couple of feet at a time. I start the actual plastic, the piping cord at the very, very end, even though the tape doesn't go all the way to the very, very end. Okay? And then I just lay it right in the middle of this thing as I go. Okay? And I just keep going with it all the way down until I run out of leather or I run out of piping cord. I try to keep it as much directly in the middle as I can. Sure does get sticky. All right, and then here at the very end, I'm just going to lop off those extra couple inches. They will not be needed. Okay, now, being very careful not to let that wad up on itself, I'm going to take and just fold this over and create that welt. Now you can do this using contact cement as well, but man, that double-sided tape sure is fast. And I haven't spilt one yet. Okay, and I'm just going to go all the way down it, squeezing it together just like this. All right, so I'm going to pause the video so that I can go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to do a second one exactly like I've done this one. When I come back, I'll show you how I sew it onto the project I'm going to sew it onto. All right, so I got these made up, and then I forgot to say also, I take my handy-dandy little roller tool here, okay? Once that's done, and I roll it right up against where that cord's inside there, and just really create a nice, tight pipe, okay? So, I do that down both of them. I already did the other one. I'm going to do this one, and then we're going to start sewing it onto the end panels, and I'll show you how I do my my splice at the very end of it, and that's it. I mean, that's the basics of how you would pipe any bag or project. Yeah, so when I come back, we're going to be over at the sewing machine, and I'll show you how I put these together. Everything I'm going to do to one end, I will do off camera to the other end. All right, so be right back. All right, if you'll remember when we started this, we didn't put the tape all the way to the very end of one piece, or one end, okay? And that was on purpose, okay? We did put the piping all the way to that end, and honestly, we can go ahead and trim that out if we want to. So just a little snippety snip. Yeah, so how I'm going to do this, I usually don't clip it or anything. I just go slow and go all the way around. But I want this end piece here to be just slightly past the middle of the bottom of my piece, okay? I don't want it at the top where it's super noticeable. I want it at the bottom. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the piping to this end cap, okay? Now I could try to put the bag together and sew the side, the end cap, and the piping all together at once, but that's a lot of things to try to keep track of and try to keep them all lined up, when instead I could just sew this end, or the piping to one end, and then when I sew the side onto it, it's already done. Okay, now, again, I've got it just slightly over the center, but I want to start an inch or two back so that I have room to lift it and work with it once I get around to that other end to do my splice, okay? So, all I'm going to do is sew this to the very, very edge of my leather, okay? Structurally, this has nothing to do with the bag other than holding these two pieces together while I put the rest of the bag together. So, I'm not worried about if I accidentally sew off the edge or anything like that. Doesn't bother me a bit. I'm just holding this to the edge of my leather. That's it. Okay, doesn't need to be pretty, doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to hold it to the edge of the leather. Okay. Now, these bottom two radiuses on these corners, they're the more difficult area to do this, because as you turn it, it's not going to want to stay where it should at the edge, but you got to force it to. Sometimes you have to make your leatherwork do what you want it to do. Okay. So, there we go. And I've learned that by clipping this all together in the beginning, it doesn't really save me any time, because it takes me just as long to clip it all together as it does just to work its way as I go. So that's why I do it this way. Now, I'm still using my just standard presser feet on this sewing machine. This is a Cobra Class 18 sewing machine with 138 thread. When I go to put the actual bag together, that's when I'll switch over and use my piping welting feet to get that stitch line in there super close to that piping. The welting piping feet, they're not really necessary, but they make the job easier, and they definitely get the needle in there closer to the piping than I normally would just using a standard foot. I was so proud of myself the first time I did any piping on my own. I called my good friend David at Leather Machine Company and was telling him about it, and he's like, "Oh, well, I didn't know you had piping feet." And I said, "What's a piping foot?" So there you go. One of the problems of not being professionally trained. So anyway, that being said, Leather Machine Company does have piping feet for these machines. All right, we're getting there. Okay, back down here to one of the tight radius corners, and I'm going to sew that in, and then as soon as I get past that corner, we'll start worrying about the transition and the splice to where I join it back to itself in the beginning. Okay, get a little bit of the straightaway sewn up here so it's facing the right direction. Now, the splice. So I've got 3/4 of an inch or so here where there's no cord inside here because we just lopped that off just a minute ago. So what I want to do is I want to cut this one off, that little bit of extra length, and then I just put it inside the hollow one here and then keep sewing. It's not a huge deal. It's not hard. It just requires me to get the scissors that I left at my desk. Oftentimes I will take an extra piece of tape and put it at that very end there, just to help hold it together, but I did forget to do that before I started, so we'll just have to do it live. So, again, I'm just going to take and put that one inside of that one, and then I'm just going to keep on sewing all the way across. and the end result will be piping. Another way to do this is I would just cut both of them off evenly and then just butt them up to each other and put another thin piece, just wrap it around the entire area where those two butt up to each other. It's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. They both have a nice effect to them. All right, so that one is done. Now I'm going to do the other one off camera, and the rest of this project will be in the duffel bag video as far as sewing the two end caps onto the bag themselves. Okay, so head over to that video if you want to see how that's done. But until then, I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and I hope you have a great day.